The truth about your productivity problems is that you have been treating a structural failure as if it were a psychological one. You spend your entire life diagnosing yourself with laziness, a lack of willpower, or an inherent flaw in your character, when the reality is far simpler and far more mechanical. Your machinery is broken, and instead of fixing the system, you keep berating the machine for failing to perform miracles. This realization is painful because it strips away your favorite excuse, which is the comforting belief that you are just naturally broken and therefore helpless. Once you accept that productivity is an engineering problem rather than a moral one, everything changes. You stop waiting for inspiration to descend from the heavens, and you start building protocols that function even on your absolute worst days. Most people operate under the dangerous delusion that discipline is a personality trait. They look at high performers and assume they possess an endless reservoir of inner strength, a genetic predisposition to early mornings, and an immunity to distraction. This is a comforting myth designed to let you off the hook. Discipline is not a trait, it is a finite resource governed by cognitive load and environmental design. When you rely on your feelings to dictate your output, you are handing the steering wheel of your life to a biological mechanism designed primarily for energy conservation and immediate comfort. Your brain does not care about your long-term goals, your financial freedom, or your legacy. It cares about keeping you safe, warm, and expending as little caloric energy as possible. Every time you face a difficult task, your brain triggers a mild alarm, interpreting the mental friction as a threat. It offers you an immediate, low-effort escape hatch, usually in the form of a glowing rectangle in your pocket. To overcome this biological trap, you must stop treating your environment as a neutral backdrop and start treating it as your primary collaborator or your worst enemy. If your workspace is littered with friction points, if your phone is face-up within arm's reach, and if your tasks are vaguely defined as work on my project, you are setting yourself up for guaranteed failure. You cannot out-meditate a poorly designed environment. You must engineer your physical and digital spaces so meticulously that the path of least resistance leads directly to the execution of your work. This means your phone lives in another room, turned off or on Do Not Disturb, placed inside a drawer where you cannot see the screen light up. It means your computer is wiped clean of browser tabs that do not pertain to the current objective. It means the physical tools you need for your first task are laid out the night before, waiting for you like a loaded weapon. The reason your goals fail is almost always tied to the ambiguity of your execution plan. Vague aspirations are the graveyard of ambition. Saying you want to get in shape, write more, or build a business is an invitation to procrastination because your brain cannot compute an ambiguous instruction. It doesn't know where to start, so it chooses paralysis. You must translate your macro goals into micro protocols that are so mathematically precise and small that they bypass your brain's threat detection system entirely. Do not set out to write a chapter, set out to open the document and write a single sentence. Do not resolve to work out for 2 hours, resolve to put on your running shoes and walk out the door. Once the motion begins, momentum takes over, but you must lower the barrier to entry until it is practically invisible. We live in a culture that worships addition. We are obsessed with accumulating more apps, more productivity hacks, more planners, and more complex systems that require more maintenance than the work itself. High performance is achieved not through accumulation, but through radical subtraction. You must look at your daily life and ruthlessly purge everything that dilutes your focus. Most of what you call busywork is just an elaborate form of psychological avoidance. You spend hours organizing your digital folders, color-coding your calendar, and researching the best productivity software because it feels like work without demanding the actual psychological suffering of creation. You are hiding behind productivity porn. Stop polishing your tools and start swinging the axe. Identify the single, high-leverage task that will move the needle, and ruthlessly eliminate every other distraction until that task is executed to completion. Time is the one asset that cannot be negotiated, replenished, or hedged. Yet, you treat it as if you have an infinite reserve tucked away in some cosmic savings account. You throw away 15-minute blocks here, half hours there, scrolling through algorithmic feeds designed to harvest your attention and sell it to advertisers. You are trading pieces of your finite existence for cheap dopamine hits that leave you feeling hollow and depleted. Radical accountability means looking at your screen time reports, your weekly schedules, and your actual output with unblinking honesty. If you claim you don't have time to build your dream, but your phone logs show 4 hours of daily consumption, you are lying to yourself. That is not a lack of time, that is a misallocation of your life. When you internalize the absolute finiteness of your days, the urgency changes. You stop negotiating with your laziness. You realize that every time you choose comfort over execution, you are literally murdering a version of yourself that could have been extraordinary. This shift requires a fundamental rewriting of your internal narrative. You cannot succeed while holding on to an identity that views hard work as a punishment or discipline as an affliction. If you view yourself as someone who struggles with consistency, your brain will constantly scan the environment for evidence to validate that belief, sabotaging your efforts at every turn. You must adopt the posture of a professional. Professionals do not wait for validation, they do not wait for emotional alignment, and they do not indulge in excuses when things become difficult. They show up because showing up is their contract with themselves. When you miss a day, you do not spiral into self-pity or use it as an excuse to quit entirely. You treat it like a data point, adjust your protocol, and resume the mission immediately. The myth of overnight success is a cultural cancer that destroys persistence. Every miraculous transformation you admire online is the visible tip of an invisible iceberg composed of thousands of agonizingly ordinary, repetitive, uncelebrated days of execution. There is no climax in real life, only the daily grind of showing up when nobody is watching, when the metrics are flat, and when your body aches for rest. The magic is entirely contained within the monotony. If you cannot find peace and power within the repetition of the boring basics, you will never achieve the extraordinary outcomes you dream about. You must fall in love with the friction. You must learn to derive satisfaction not from the praise of others, but from the quiet, internal validation of knowing that you kept your word to yourself when it would have been infinitely easier to fold. As you step away from this session, the temptation will be to intellectualize everything you have just read. You will want to take notes, synthesize the philosophy, and feel a surge of temporary motivation that feels like progress. Do not fall into that trap. Knowledge without execution is just another form of sophisticated procrastination. Close this screen, pick the single most uncomfortable task you have been avoiding all week, and execute it for 20 minutes without interruption. Do not think about the grand vision, do not look at the finish line, and do not wait until you feel ready. Action precedes clarity. The resistance you feel right now is the exact compass pointing you toward the growth you desperately need. Own your time, lock down your environment, destroy your excuses, and get to work.